Hello and welcome to another IFAR Evening webinar hosted by the International Foundation for Art Research, better known as IFAR. I am Sharon Flesher, Executive Director, and on behalf of everyone at IFAR, I want to thank you for attending. You're in for a treat this evening. We have a program devoted to the FBI's art crime team, and not surprisingly, it's booked full, around 500 registrants. As a nonprofit organization dedicated to integrity in the visual arts, IFAR has a long history with the FBI, and in our office, we proudly display a plaque sent to us way back in 1989 that says, quote, "In appreciation from your friends at the FBI." So in 2005, when the FBI's art crime team was first formed, IFAR hosted an event in New York where we're headquartered to introduce the team. And by the way, the proceedings of that program were published in our IFAR journal, and have been most of our programs in the past before they went virtual. So this summer, when I gave a talk on provenance research at a workshop for the FBI, and later spoke with the newly appointed head of the FBI's art crime team, Randy Deaton, I took the opportunity to invite him to update our audience, now virtual because of the pandemic, about the art crime team, which, as he'll tell you, has grown considerably in the intervening years. Many of you in the audience are new to IFAR, drawn by this interesting program. So I hope you'll take the time to learn more about us. Please visit our website, ifar.org. Check out our unique educational resources, including our art law and cultural property database, our catalog raisonné database, our provenance guide, also our authentication and provenance research services, and our publications, especially our award-winning IFAR journal. And then, if you're so inclined, perhaps you'll decide to subscribe to the journal or become an IFAR supporter. Like many nonprofits right now, we're facing challenging times. Now, back to tonight's program, for which we've assembled 4 terrific speakers. I'll start, though, with some logistics. Each of our speakers will speak for around 15 minutes, no more. That's to leave time for questions at the end, after all of the talks. But you can begin writing your questions at any time by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. The chat button is disabled, at least I assume it's disabled. Please note, and this is important, none of the speakers will or can discuss active cases in their talks or during the Q&A, and they won't give personal opinions. So please don't ask. I'm sure you understand. Do keep your questions short. Now for the sequence of the talks and a brief introduction of each speaker, which I will not provide again. Leading off this evening will be the aforementioned Randy Deaton, more formally Randolph Deaton IV, a supervisory special agent at the FBI who became program manager of the art crime team this August. He's been with the FBI since 1998, working with both the New York office and the New Orleans division. He became a member of the FBI's Rapid Deployment Art Crime Team in 2016. I'll let him give you more specifics about the team and also his work. Randy will be followed by Jake Archer, a special agent at the FBI assigned to the Philadelphia division. He formally joined the FBI's art crime team in 2014, although he was an adjunct member before then. Jake will discuss some of the cases he's worked on, but it's helpful to know that Jake has both a law degree and a master's degree in art history. And in relation to the latter, he interned at the Conservation Lab at the Princeton University Art Museum. After Jake, and I don't know if you can see the speakers' faces, but I hope you can as I'm saying this. After Jake, we will be hearing from Chris McKeogh of New York, of the New York division. Chris joined the FBI in 2003 and has been a part of the art crime team since 2014. He too has an impressive pre-FBI background. He's a former university science professor with 2 master's degrees, not 1, 2 master's degrees in physics. He exclusively investigates art crime matters in the New York office. And I'm sure that some of you have seen his name in some of the recent arrests and convictions that have made the news in New York and around the country. Holding up the fort will be Katie Newton. She's the prosecutor dedicated to working the Philadelphia-based FBI art crime team agents working with the Philadelphia-based FBI art crime team agents. And in addition to art crimes, she prosecutes corruption and financial crimes and drug trafficking rings. Before joining the federal government, she was a litigator at a law firm and clerked for a Second Circuit appellate judge. I'm sure you'll agree that these are all very impressive people. So with no further delay, I very happily and proudly give you Randy Deaton, and I will return after all 4 of the talks to help and moderate with the Q&A. So Randy, you're on.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Sharon. Thank you to Sharon Fleischer. Thank you to IFAR for allowing us this opportunity this evening with all of you to talk about the FBI and the FBI's art crime program, and specifically the FBI's art crime team. I'm going to share my screen with you guys now. Hopefully everyone can see the slides. So the FBI art crime team was officially established in 2004. At that time, there was just a handful of FBI agents throughout all our 56 divisions that were actively working art and cultural related crimes at that time. But the FBI has a long history going back decades of art crime, of special agents who were involved in art theft cases, fraud cases, forgery cases, antiquities cases. But officially the date for the art crime team establishment was in 2004. The FBI art crime team sits under the FBI art crime program based at FBI headquarters here in Washington, D.C., where I'm located at tonight. Of the members that we have over 20 specially trained members located throughout the U.S. There's 1 supervisory special agent and program manager, myself, and we have 1 management and program analyst assigned to the team. So right now we're a healthy number. We're over 20 members. That number may fluctuate over time due to transfers and due to retirements, but we have art crime team members assigned to the team and that are located and stationed around the United States throughout our 56 field offices. Now that obviously with that number in 56 field offices, we do not have a art crime team agent in every one of our field offices, but we do have a number of agents located in our bigger field offices such as Los Angeles and Chicago, New York, Boston, and Miami. When I became an art crime team member and received that honor of the selection, I was in the New Orleans division. And so I've been on the team, as Ms. Sharon said, for about the last 5 years or so now. The art crime team has a rapid deployment capability. Agents that are assigned to the team, we could get a call tonight during this program to where a museum has been burglarized in another part of the country, and we would have agents that would respond at a moment's notice to that particular crime and work with the field office that covers that area and with the local police that may be involved. So we do have a rapid deployment capability. All our crime team members conduct art crime investigations and support art crime investigations. Being an agent assigned to the New Orleans division, my territory covered Texas. And so I may not work a art crime case in Texas, but I would lend some subject matter expertise, some guidance, some experience to an agent that may not have ever worked a cultural property case in their career. The type of cases that the art crime team is involved in, we work a lot of investigations involving theft, fraud, forgery, international trafficking, and other federal violations involving art, antiquities, antiques, Native American cultural material, and other cultural property. We've worked cases involving coins, musical instruments, movie memorabilia, and sports memorabilia. Every art crime team member, I'm sure the public does not know, has a domestic and international region of assignment. My assignments were, when I was in New Orleans division, I covered the states and the FBI divisions in Texas, the New Orleans division for the whole state of Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Alabama. And my international region of assignment was the Middle East countries. One of the things that the FBI is proud of is that we assist our FBI legal attaché offices, which there are several and many that are located around the world, and we help our foreign partners. We may get a request through Ligat Cairo, for example, that the Egyptian government and their law enforcement has located a looted object in the United States. That information will be passed through our legal attaché office. It will be forwarded to FBI headquarters, to me, and then I'll have an agent on the art crime team or another division assigned to help work that matter. We pride ourselves in giving the best possible service that we can to our legal attaché offices and our foreign partners. Another part of every art crime team member's duties is to provide domestic and international training. The FBI, the COVID pandemic delayed that in the last year or so. Hopefully we'll be back on track, but the FBI art crime team travels around the world to give workshops on how to investigate cultural property matters. And we train our foreign partners, their law enforcement, their ministerial people, prosecutors, judges, museum individuals, on to various ways that we would coordinate efforts to investigate a crime and how we would work those crimes. Every art crime team member has a responsibility to conduct liaison and public outreach. Go give out business cards, go drink coffee with someone, go to auction houses, go to galleries, visit with collectors, go to appraisers, make those contacts, because without the public's help and without tips from the public, we simply cannot do our job. So we do a lot of outreach to raise public awareness of the threat to cultural property, and that the FBI is in fact wanting information about these crimes so we can open up investigations and seek justice for victims. One thing that the FBI art program also manages is the FBI's National Stolen Art File. Right now, we have over 8,000 items that have been stolen that are listed as stolen in the FBI's National Stolen Art File. We get referrals from foreign countries. We get referrals from local police departments to enter items that have been stolen from museums, public collections, private collections. And if we can get a police report and there's some other requirements that we need, we will put that information and an image of that object into the National Stolen Art File, so that one day we hope when someone is doing due diligence, whether it's a gallery, an auction house, or a private individual that's debating to purchase something, they will do their due diligence and look in the National Stolen Art File to see if that information is there on that piece. And if it is, we would usually get a call and get notification that that piece is located, and then we would take the necessary steps to try and recover that piece. So I give a lot of presentations over the years. I've given a lot of presentation over the years, and I always get asked, well, Randy, how did you get on the road to the art crime team and the art crime program? And I credit all of this with one case that I opened up in 2008. And unlike a lot of the agents maybe on the art crime team, that their first case started with a forgery case or a theft case involving fine art or an antiquity, mine involved folk art. What you see before you are some images of folk art paintings that are forgeries. And they were made in the likeness of a very famous folk artist from Louisiana. Her name was Clementine Hunter, who is from Central Louisiana. Her work is very popular in the South and very collectible amongst the fine art collectors around the world in the United States. And this is the man in front of you is William James Toy. This was an individual who had a 40-year career as an art forger. Mr. Toy created not only forgeries for folk art, but also fine art forgeries. And I always get asked this other question, well, Randy, what does a forger's house look like? What does their studio look like? What you see before you is a photograph from the FBI search of the Toy residence in September of 2009. This is where I believe Mr. Toy, who is also a draftsman, this is where I believe he created many of his fine art and folk art forgeries. When we do these searches of forgers' residences or studios, we find a lot of documentation related to artwork and financial transactions. We find a lot of books related to particular works of art or particular artists. We find photos of artwork. We find copies of cashier's checks and a lot of documentation. And we find a lot of paint tubes in jars. This is an Edward Hopper forgery that was found in Mr. Toy's home. These are just a small example of hundreds of containers of paint that the FBI seized, that we seized to be later analyzed by forensic experts and scientists. This is kind of a humorous photograph. I always show this in the presentations on this case. This was a selfie that Mr. Toy took of himself with a cat right there in his face. This was one off of several, I think 16 memory cards we got out of Mr. Toy's home. This one's important and I'll explain in a second, but if you notice in the background, you'll see a book there, Degas and the Dance. Well, Mr. Toy made several Degas forgeries over his career. This is an image of me looking through a microscope. The person to my left is Joe Barabee, who's a scientist with McKeogh Associates in Illinois. This is in front of you is a real authentic Clementine Hunter Zinnias painting. And what's interesting about this picture here and looking at this picture is that the FBI during this case contracted with 2 private laboratories to do some forensic work and comparative analysis of authentic Clementine Hunter paintings, but also of several questioned paintings that we believe were forgeries. And one particular scientist, I think it was the 19th paintings that were suspect works, he found cat hair embedded in the paints of all the forgeries that were analyzed. Mr. Toy had a fondness for cats, and I believe when we searched his house that day, there were like 20 some odd cats in the residence at the time. So that's a pretty funny aspect of that particular case. This is a Monet forgery, though it was signed by Mr. Toy with his signature. This is a copy of a Monet work. This is it on an online website for the museum in France. Let's compare the two. Pretty good replica, in my opinion. When I was preparing for this presentation, I was looking through these old search photos and I found this photo of a train in the wintertime on Mr. Toy's wall. Well, lo and behold, look on the same website, there's the original Monet. And if you compare the two, not a bad copy. To this day, I have no idea where this particular painting that Mr. Toy painted is located. And this is a very famous painting that I associate with Mr. Toy. Back in the 1990s, the FBI opened an investigation. Mr. Toy's name came up as the consigner of several questioned works, which ultimately turned out to be forgeries. The Matisse that Mr. Toy created, as you can see, listed as the provenance in the auction catalog. Mr. Toy is Mr. W. Jeffrey Toy of New Orleans. And that supposedly this painting came from the Edicone collection at the Baltimore Museum of Art. Well, there was no such painting in the Baltimore Museum of Art. This made the auction catalog cover. It was ultimately purchased online by a buyer from Jakarta, Indonesia, if I'm not mistaken, for $340,000, but it never left the country. The FBI eventually seized this particular painting. This is me several years ago, back in 2009, I believe, holding this painting in the FBI office in Alexandria, Louisiana. And this is where the Matisse painting sits today at FBI headquarters in a special exhibit for the art crime team. I have two paintings that I loaned to this collection for display for the FBI employees to view. This is the Matisse that I previously spoke about, and there was also a Clementine Hunter forgery that is now on display. So I am at the end of my time, and that's going to be it for my presentation. I look forward to everyone's questions at the end. And again, I'd like to thank Ms. Sharon Flesher and everyone at IFAR for giving us the opportunity to educate all of you about the great work that the FBI art crime team has done in the past and what we continue to do. And again, without the public's help, we cannot do our job. So I would encourage anytime someone has something to report to the FBI, contact your local field office, or you can submit a tip online through the FBI.gov website. So I will now turn it over to my colleague and fellow art crime team member from the Philadelphia division. This is Special Agent Jake Archer.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, IFAR. Thank you to the audience here for tuning in. It's a pleasure to be before you. My name is Jake Archer. I'm a special agent, as was introduced with the FBI's art crime team. I just wanted to take a moment to also recognize and say thank you to the rest of the panelists that are on here, our entire art crime team, all the case agents that we work day in and day out with, as well as all of our federal partners and art and cultural heritage partners that are tuning in here, that the case agents and the cases which Randy described, we interact with on a daily basis. Okay. So just a little bit about me that'll help shape the presentation here. So I work on art and cultural property matters full-time in the Philadelphia division. As Randy said, I have a domestic and international area that I cover. I cover obviously Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and as well New Jersey with Chris McKeogh, which is always a treat when we get to work together. Maryland, Delaware, and West Virginia. Internationally, I cover Central Europe. But you also see here on the screen, I'm a member of the FBI's evidence response team. So my 9-to-5 job, day-to-day, is investigating art and cultural property matters. But when we have bombings, shootings, kidnappings, homicides that require an FBI response, I'm part of the team that goes out to do that. And so I'm constantly thinking about evidence collection and our mission and capabilities. And so that helps formulate some of our response here for matters, which I'd like to share with you tonight. And so I'll be focusing on some of our mission and capabilities as it relates to the field here. And so I'll start with some field forensics and laboratory services. And this was a Ben-Shahn forgery matter. And so we encountered this piece in the field along with several others, and it was signed Ben-Shahn, a very famous artist. And we had a question about its authenticity. So we conducted some field forensics that we would conduct on many other cases that we would reference in other traditional FBI matters. And so we used raking light, and we were able to find some friction-ridge detail. And matter of fact, that was my art crime team partner, Sarah Cardone, who was able to find that She had previously worked at the latent print unit. And so we were able to go ahead and identify in this area the opportunity for us to look further for some potential fingerprints. So at this point, after we conduct our field forensics, we're going to send this off to the FBI laboratory, which is one of the, if not the foremost expert in the world on these matters. And we wanted three things. We wanted the front and back photography, we wanted up close to the signature, and we wanted a latent print examination. So here was the front and back. We always want to document that and make sure that we have all the borders. Everything is clearly identified for the future. We have scale. It's under proper lighting. And the question documents unit down there at the lab does an outstanding job, and we want to recognize them as well. They made sure and got a perfect up close of the signature. And why do we want that? It's high resolution. We want to retain that for future comparisons. And then it's able to provide guidance for us for signature exemplars, should we ever obtain them. Then it went over to the latent print operations unit, another fabulous unit at the lab. They were looking first through oblique lighting. They only wanted to use non-destructive techniques. And you'll see where the yellow tabs are, that these are actually patent prints, which were observed. And latent prints are the material that's left between your friction ridge, between your ridges there on there. So some of the oils and residue that leaves a latent print. A patent print is when you actually imprint into a media. And in this case, it looked like we had three of them. We thought we had three in the field. It turns out we did have three here, as well a palm print. No latent prints were detected on the verso. And you can see that with a little bit more detail, and you'll see it's under oblique lighting. Here's an up close. And if you can't see they're having trouble, we have that. The lab was able to put that under black and white. And ultimately, this led us to identify the person who made this piece. After conducting further investigation and interview, found out that that person did not add the signature, which then allowed us to further the investigation. We realized, a lot of times it's called a floating signature, but it was simply added after the fact for someone who thought that this particular piece could be something that was to be passed off as a Ben Shahn. So we look at our field forensics, and now we get to the idea of, okay, a case has been done. This is a theft case. We have recovered material. We've recovered works of art, and they need to go back. Again, I have the pleasure and privilege of working with Assistant United States Attorney KT Newton in Philadelphia on a daily basis. She is phenomenal. And this was a matter that we worked together. We've worked all these matters together. But in this particular case, we were able to make a recovery of this artwork in the Philadelphia area. It had been taken from an artist in Belgium. Very tragic story there. But ultimately, KT was able to obtain a judge's order that said it had to go back. So we had 7 works of art in Philadelphia in our evidence hold that we had created. And repatriation is easier said than done. Okay, great. What happens when the legal part of the case is over, or at least the adversarial part is, and now you have an order that says you must get this back? Remember, we have a big ocean between the U.S. and Europe. And so this is the story about what our team has to go through sometimes, and the ability and capabilities that we have to complete the mission. So understanding that, and understanding that these were created, you're not able to get this on a commercial aircraft. So we were able to contact the U.S. military, and we were able to coordinate a flight that was heading over to Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany. And we worked through the McGuire Air Force Base, Air Force contingent, and you see them here, and we want to thank them again. Who you see in blue there is Mike Fisher. He's from our squad in Philadelphia, former Air Force guy. So he was the right guy to help out on getting this to McGuire Air Force Base. And the load master found a C-17 that actually was filled with ammo. And so we said, oh, you're putting the art with the ammo? They said, yeah, you know, that's how it goes sometimes, but you're able to get a free ride over to Europe with it. And we said, we'll take it. And so because it was still evidence, we had to track that through and document its journey, the artwork's journey. And so you see it being loaded on here into the back of the airplane. And we had to coordinate with our sub office in Frankfurt to receive this once it landed. So we had photographs of the tail wing taken. And it's a little dark here because this was at dusk. We have takeoff, and we were sending these images over. I can't show you over at Ramstein, but once it landed, we were able to go over and get it out of the hold, place it in a consulate van, where we were able to go ahead and truck that up through the German countryside to the embassy in Brussels, where the repatriation would occur. And so once we got there, it was the moment of truth. Were we able to go ahead and successfully and safely bring these items back? Because we were returning them to the victims. And so we were. And this is the scene, and the Charge d'Affaires was able to go ahead and conduct an external repatriation to a police department, which was able to then go ahead and conduct the internal repatriation to Agnes Lorca, the artist's daughter, who had been looking for these paintings for a very long time. And as you see here, ultimately, this is the goal, and that's to make the victim whole. And that's something that the FBI cares very much about in all of our cases. And so you see Agnes Lorca's daughter center, KT is in red. I'm there on the right, and my old partner, Donnie Aspirin, as well, our Belgian counterpart. And it was wonderful working this case with him. It took about 3.5 years, and that was Lucas Verhagen. And then with the Malheur wildlife standoff, sometimes it's not your traditional case. This certainly wasn't. And just want to give everyone a little context here about the landscape. So you see on the map, this is what an area that we're dealing with. And the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge was the site of a 41-day armed occupation, which began on January 2nd, 2016. It was also one of the most important archaeological sites in the Northern Great Basin. During the occupation, individuals dug 2 trenches that were through known archaeological sites for the purpose of building a defensive position. The largest of the 2 trenches was over 100 feet long, 23 feet wide, and 7 feet deep. And the art crime team led the investigation to identify and ultimately prosecute the individuals responsible for the illegal excavation. The ACT worked closely with the U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and the Burns Paiute archaeologists, which is the Paiute tribe, were the Native Americans associated with this land. And we all worked together to conduct an archaeological damage assessment to properly and respectfully collect the evidence to support the prosecution. In that trial, the art crime team led by our Portland division provided all the testimony relative to the illegal excavations, which resulted in guilty verdicts for those involved. And as you can see here with this overhead shot, you'll see some of the trenches and sites where the art crime team helped to collect evidence alongside the archaeologists. And you'll see on your right, one of the trenches, and what we actually did. We were out there in the trenches working side by side to collect hundreds of pieces of evidence there. Again, a very, very challenging scene. And just for scope, there I am standing, and that's 30 miles till we got to our site each day. And we still had several miles to drive to that sign. So these were long days, but we took a lot of pride in working on this matter, as we do with all of our matters. And I want to conclude here by speaking about the United States Cultural Heritage Coordinating Committee. For those of you that don't know, this is very important. And it was established in 2016 under the Protect and Preserve International Cultural Property Act. Currently, we have 12 federal agencies assigned, and the goal here is for the U.S. government and for its agencies and members that you see here to coordinate activities to achieve these following goals. And they're all related to protecting and preserving cultural heritage, especially when we think about the international market. It's not just overseas. We have our Native American material that's here and goes out. A lot of material is here and goes out, but we also care about what's coming in. And so this is a working group that has been put together to try and combat these issues. And we have 4 working groups with the committee that actually are the arms or the muscle that go out and actually get the mission of the committee done. And that is technology, which I was able to chair for the last 5 years, and it was a privilege and an honor. And the public awareness and partnerships, preservation, and the cultural antiquities task force, which had been in existence since 2004 and was assumed into this. And we take a one government approach, and we try and incubate good ideas and better interagency cooperation on all these matters. Our goal is to forge consensus on the matters that affect all or most of the member agencies as it relates to protecting and preserving art and cultural heritage and cultural property here. And so I put this in here. It's a sense of Congress that the president should establish an interagency coordinating committee, and that such committee should, and especially for everyone on here tonight, consult participants in the international art and cultural property market. And so, as Randy said before, it's not only our FBI, our crime team mission, but now it's a federal government mission to go ahead and do this. And so one of our great things that we've been able to put out already is from our technology working group, and we're trying to make life better for the investigators. We've signed an agreement with University of Pennsylvania to go ahead and create a cultural property expert on call program. And the focus here is it's a one-stop shop for object identification in the field for law enforcement when dealing with these matters, because we understand our bottleneck is identifying in the field this material. And so an agent or an officer can send an email, basic email. It'll go to Penn. It'll be answered within 72 hours. And then Penn, through the network of all the trusted U.S. sources here, Smithsonian, Getty, all the great academic institutions and other museums that are out there. I can list them all, list many, but time is running out. We can tap into that and find the right person to help that particular agent with that particular material in that particular moment in time. And with that, I thank you. Chris McKeogh is next, and I'm happy to turn it over to him. Chris, whenever you're ready.
Hi, everybody. There we go. There I am. Thank you for having us, IFAR. Thank you to the other speakers as well. And thank you for all of you that are participating. The main theme of what I'm speaking about here and what all the speakers are saying is that we can't do our jobs without you, whether it be, looking at some of the participants on the list of people that are watching this event. You are experts in your field. You're extremely helpful to our investigations, along with our foreign partners and the U.S. Attorney's Office and other agencies. It takes all of us put together to accomplish our goals. The important thing here, I'm going to just talk about a couple of things, but the important thing is that no U.S. agency has international jurisdiction. So we need to work with our foreign partners and folks throughout the world to get our cases worked and accomplish our goals. As Randy spoke about earlier, these are some of the cases that we do investigate on the art crime team. I work here in New York. As a New Yorker, I like to think that the entire world is my jurisdiction, but in actuality, like I said, we have to work with our partners. So we work thefts and recoveries, fraud matters, Holocaust restituted art, looted antiquity matters, Native American ethnographic investigations, and money laundering. And I guess I could put NFT and blockchain on the bottom of that. I could probably update that. But I'm just going to talk about two things here. I'm going to talk about Holocaust restituted art and then some of the work that we do with our partners. So where do these cases come from? They come from you. They come from auction houses and other art professionals. We work with auction houses frequently on these types of cases. Foreign governments come to us for assistance. and whether it be attorneys or victims or heirs or the public. And just to go through a few of the more recent examples of some of these cases that we've worked. This is a Renoir that was stolen by the Device and Shoots Commando, DSK, from a bank vault in Paris in 1941. And from there, it was transported to the Tuileries, to the Jeu de Paume Museum. It was owned by Alfred Weinberger, who was a Parisian resident. He actually survived the war, tried to get this painting back several times after the war and was not successful. It bounced at a number of different places, but there were a few red flags that we worked this case with Christie's auction house, and there were a few things that came up. This was the provenance as it was originally sold back about 3-4 years ago. And the first red flag when you're dealing with Nazi looted art is if you are dealing with an artist or a work that had a strong likelihood of being on the European continent during World War II, you have an added responsibility to try to figure out where was this piece during the war. And as you can see here, Sutro Gallery London does not really cut it. It doesn't tell you when it was there. It doesn't tell you any further details about where it was before, during, or after. And then it pops up at Christie's London in 1997 through some great detective work by Christie's and digging through some archives overseas and speaking to a number of professionals here in the National Archives and a number of different organizations. This is the completed provenance. And as you can see here, there are a lot of missing lines. And as you put it all together, this paints a much clearer picture of where this thing had been. There is a website called the ERR Project, and it's one of several websites that digitally archives Nazi paperwork, Nazi documents. Nazis kept documents of all of their seizures. They frequently took photographs of their seizures. And as you can see here on the right, this is one of those photographs that they took at the time of the seizure in the 40s. So taking that photo and being able to compare that to what you're looking at in the present day, you can see obviously that this is the same work. And that's one of the ways that we can definitively say, hey, this is stolen work. It's not the only way, but it's definitely the most effective. I show this photo here because this is a press conference that we held following the recovery and the repatriation back to the family members. And we do work with the press. And why do we work with the press? The reason for that is that this is a matter that has been in the dark for 70 or more years. And if we can take an opportunity to shine a light on a case that has not been in the public eye for decades, then we're always looking for that advantage. And we're hopeful that people will come forward to say, you know what, I think I have another work from that collection, or I have a piece of the puzzle that could be helpful to the investigation. We're never looking to recover the one item and move on. We're always looking for any items that we can find from the same collection. And there are certainly a lot more out there, as I'll get to in a minute. This is going back about 2 years ago, French bronze gilded vases that were returned to the heirs of victims in Germany. They were seized from Lucy Meyer-Fold in Berlin in 1939. And again, this is an auction catalog of the Meyer-Fold estate. And if you can see on the right there, you can see actually these two vases that are in the photo. This is an interesting one in the sense that we're speaking to the heirs at the recovery and at the repatriation of these two items. And I had asked something along the lines of, so how many more do you have to go? Do you have any more that you're still looking to recover from the Meyer-Fold collection? And I got this sort of quizzical look, and they said, well, there are 404 items that were stolen. These are the first two that are recovered. And here we are decades upon decades later, and there are still thousands upon thousands of items that are still out there missing that we're still looking for today. So the work to recover this artwork is long from over, and really in a lot of ways is just getting started. One more example of this is in 2019, the recovery of Solomon Koenig's Scholar Sharpening His Quill. And this is a work from 1639. It was eventually in the Adolf Schloss collection in France. And this one was handpicked and transported to Germany to be in Hitler's museum in Linz. It was transported to the Führerbau, sat in Munich for a while, and eventually found its way into the possession of Walter Hofer. Walter Hofer was one of the personal art dealers for Hermann Göring and the Nazis. And this one was sold in about 1951 to a German family living in Chile, and it stayed there until 2018 until it popped up for sale. So here is Hofer on the right with Hermann Göring inspecting her work during the war. Walter Hofer was never, he never served prison time. He was convicted in absentia in France, sentenced to 10 years, never served a day in prison, and was for some reason allowed to continue dealing with artwork even after the war. There were a lot of artworks that he had during the war and he kept and he sold. So this is a good example of, well, how can you tell that Walter Hofer actually had this work? What proof do you have of that? And we always like to say in the art crime team that the front of a painting is incredibly interesting, but the back is where all the secrets lie. And if you were to look at the back, I don't know if you could, how well you can see this here, but that is Walter Hofer's signature on the back of the frame. And it is still there today, still visible. He actually signed this thing, and there you go. That's as good as it gets as far as proof to say, hey, he had this thing. A couple of seconds here to talk about outreach. We work with our foreign partners. It is a small world these days in the sense that we work with our overseas partners every day. We work with the State Department and other domestic agencies, and we have initiated, along with the Italian Carabinieri, some training with foreign law enforcement on how to properly analyze and catalog a crime scene or historical site. So this is from a training in Tunisia in 2016. It's one of 3 trainings that we've conducted with Libyan archaeologists and police. And it's taking it from the top, teaching the very basics on how do you recover items from a crime scene? How do you properly document it? How do you take photos? How do you do a crime sketch? And here we have an exercise on how to handle a custom seizure if there's a car stop. How do we find the items in the back and what do we do with them? I mentioned before how to take a crime scene sketch. And these are outreach, like I said, with the Department of State and other agencies that we're working to educate different law enforcement and different professionals in various countries to hopefully safeguard their antiquities. This is another outreach that we had in 2018. And this is one of 3 different sites that were being excavated there. There are a number of different challenges. There are local challenges, international challenges. This site, for example, there was a problem with a lot of the local help that was helping that wanted to know when this wall was going to be deconstructed and blown apart because they believed that there was a pot of gold inside. And it's one of the challenges you don't think of as an archaeologist to say, you know, there's some education just to educate the people that you're working with to say, well, this is a Roman fort. You know, the ultimate goal here is to uncover the past, not to look for the pot of gold here. But these are some of the examples, and I don't want to take too much time. So one of the great partnerships that we have, whether it be through the Southern District of New York or the Eastern District of Pennsylvania or a number of other great prosecuting offices throughout the country, is our AUSAs. KT Newton, who's going to speak next, has a wealth of experience working art crime matters. She's a great partner of ours, and I'm going to turn it over to her for a bit of a different perspective from the prosecutor standpoint. So thank you all.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone, including Sharon and the team at IFAR, my fellow panelists. I am an Assistant U.S. attorney. This first slide is just telling you how big the Department of Justice is. On the little boxes down on the right, you would find both U.S. offices as well as the FBI, as well as the criminal division for the Justice Department. Our mission in connection with cultural property is obviously to enforce the law and also to work with our partners in preventing and controlling crime. Part of this is we try to seek just punishment, hopefully for those who are guilty of unlawful behavior. One interesting point about this when I started working with the FBI Art Crime Team is that our focus sometimes is not necessarily always just on prosecution of individuals, but as you've heard from Randy, from Jake, and from Chris, it's also to get the objects back and get them to who they belong to. And that can sometimes be even more important for us than a prosecution, although it's something we're always looking to do. We've got with the DOJ, again, I said the U.S. Attorney's offices, our criminal division, and working with the FBI. There's 93 United States Attorney's offices around the country. I am in one of them, the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. You heard Chris mention the Southern District of New York, the Eastern District of New York. Randy mentioned Eastern District of Louisiana. Jake also mentioned some other jurisdictions. But one of the things we all do is one of our main functions is the prosecutions of criminal cases in the United States. So when I work with the FBI or crime team or any of my colleagues and other U.S. attorneys' offices do, what we're looking at is what are the options that we have available to us with a cultural property crime? One, can we prosecute? Is there a criminal statute that we can use to prosecute individuals who are committing these crimes? Two, if we can't prosecute someone, can we still, again, get the item back using some civil process? Because again, repatriation is one of our main concerns. One of the main tools that we use is what's called the Interstate Transportation of Stolen Property Act. It's a crime to transport any stolen item with the value of $5,000 or more across state lines or across international lines. The individual has to know the object was stolen. We have to be able to prove that the object is worth $5,000 or more. It's also a crime for one of those stolen objects for someone, again, who knows it's been stolen to receive it, possess it, conceal it, store it, or dispose of it in any other way. And this is often very important for us when we have objects that perhaps were stolen quite some time ago, as I'll talk about a little bit later. If an individual who knows it's stolen still possesses it, sells it, tries to sell it, we can still prosecute that individual for that possession or disposal or storing of that stolen object. One example, and this goes back to the first example of interstate transportation of a stolen property, was a case of really a crime of opportunity. An individual, Mr. Garrett, went to the Muhammad Ali Center in Louisville, Kentucky. While he was there, he was alone in a room and took the opportunity to steal a signed Leroy Neiman print. The print was very special because it was signed by both Muhammad Ali as well as Leroy Neiman, both of whom have since passed away. Mr. Garrett brought that print back to Philadelphia. Eventually, it was discovered that he had taken it through good work from both the museum as well as from the FBI. We did talk to Mr. Garrett. He admitted that he had stolen it, but what he told us was that he felt bad about it and wanted to ship this back, started to drive it back, ended up in Virginia, and mailed it to Postmaster General, Louisville, Kentucky. Needless to say, the signed print never got back to the museum. So unfortunately, we don't know where it is now. Is it in the somewhere in the lost letter files? Think of Raiders of the Lost Ark, last seen for the Postal Service. Had someone else, did they uncover it and do they still have it? But what we did do is we did prosecute Mr. Garrett for his interstate transportation of that stolen property. We also sometimes look at mail fraud or wire fraud. If someone has a scheme to defraud, to obtain money or property through false representations, and they use the mail or they use a wire, it can be a fax if people still use faxes. It can actually be an email. It can be a text message. It can be things that are sent from one computer through a server that's held someplace else. But if the mail or wire is used in this scheme to defraud, we have jurisdiction to prosecute that case. This was a case in which shows the rich are different than a lot of us. We had an individual who had owned or inherited a Rodin Le Baiser. You may or may not know that Rodin actually authorized over 300 bronze castings of Le Baiser or the Kiss in different sizes. This one casting of Le Baiser had indisputable provenance for the family in Massachusetts that bought it. The owner lent it to a friend who died. Another supposed friend took it. It ended up in a storage unit and ultimately ended up in the possession of a young woman in New Jersey who took it to an auction house in New York and gave a false affidavit, faxing that to the auction house, saying that this had been in her family in the garage. Nobody really wanted it. She didn't know it was really worth anything. And of course, it turns out to be an authentic Rodin Le Baiser. We were ultimately able to show the provenance of this particular Le Baiser from the characteristics of it. We were able to show that the mailings and the wires, the emails that this young woman had sent along with her accomplice to the auction house in New York was in furtherance of her being able to auction this item off and get the proceeds from the auction. So we prosecuted these two individuals, Ms. Walton and Mr. Davis, for conspiracy to commit mail fraud and wire fraud. Unfortunately, at that point, the piece had actually already been sold at auction, but the true owner of the piece was able to get the proceeds of that. So while they don't have their family historical treasure back, they did get some compensation for it. We all know about the March 1990 Isabel Stewart Gardner Museum heist. And as a result, that Congress's reaction to that was to create a new criminal statute dealing with the theft of artwork. And while it's titled theft of major artwork, what it really is it's a crime to steal from a museum, something that's owned by the museum, under the control of the museum, or in the custody of the museum, an object of cultural heritage. And that is specifically defined as something that is over 100 years old and worth in excess of $5,000 or worth at least $100,000. It's also a crime under the statute to receive, to conceal, to exhibit, or dispose of that object of cultural heritage stolen from the museum, knowing that the object had been stolen. The keys here are, it has to be stolen from a museum in the United States. It has to meet the definition of the object of cultural heritage, and the individual has to know that either has to have stolen the object or know that this particular object was stolen. We had an interesting case in the Eastern District that involved several aspects a few years ago. What you're seeing here is a rifle. It's a Christian Erder rifle that was made in 1775. Christian Erder was a very well-known gunsmith from the outside Philadelphia area. This was one of the few rifles that he signed and was dated. Another rifle very similar to this one is actually in Windsor Castle at this time. The FBI art crime team, particularly Jake and his partner at that time, Sarah Cardone, received information that an individual had purchased this rifle, was doing some research on it, found it in a book, and realized that it was a Christian Erder rifle that had been stolen over 40 years ago from the Valley Forge State Park Museum. So here we are, more than 40 years later, and we're actually recovering the rifle. The individual who gave us the rifle had purchased it from someone else. Once he realized what it was and that it was stolen, he agreed to waive any rights of ownership. So he did the right thing, and we were able to repatriate the rifle. It belongs to the Pennsylvania Society of the Sons of the Revolution. They had given it on permanent loan to the Valley Forge State Park Museum, which is no longer in existence. The successor to that museum is the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. So the society made the decision to again put it on permanent loan once they got it back to the Museum of the American Revolution, where it's on display. And this was at a ceremony done for the society once the rifle had been recovered and was being repatriated to them. Even more interesting with this, though, is that, okay, so this was stolen over 40 years ago. We know who purchased it. We know who he bought it from. And Special Agent Archer and his partners, along with local law enforcement, went to talk to the individual from whom the dealer had purchased the rifle. And sometimes you don't know what will happen, but in this case, that individual, Thomas Gavin, admitted that yes, he had stolen that rifle from the Valley Forge State Park Museum more than 40 years ago. As a result, because he sold this particular item in 2018, we prosecuted him for the disposal of an object of cultural heritage stolen from a museum. The Christian Erder rifle, as I said, was made by Christian Erder in 1775. The value that we got for the rifle at this time was $175,000. So it met all the criteria for us to be able to prosecute Mr. Gavin under this statute. Jake mentioned the case about the Anye Lorca's paintings. We can't always, again, prosecute. In this particular case, we had received a request from the Belgian government under a multilateral assistance treaty to help get the paintings back. The two dealers who had taken the paintings, told Miss Lorca was alive at the time they were going to do a show of her paintings, kept the paintings, did not return them. Miss Lorca then died. But as Jake told you, her daughter kept up the search and worked very closely with the Belgian police. The two dealers were prosecuted in absentia in Belgium, but our concern was working with the Belgians to be able to get these paintings back. Which you heard from Jake, we were able to do. We were again able to get a waiver of ownership from the individuals. They gave up the paintings. We were then able to get them back and present them back to to Ms. Lorca's family at the repatriation ceremony that was held in Belgium. It's one of the true pleasures that we get to do of these last items about repatriating things like the Christian Erder rifle and like Ms. Lorca's paintings. I know I told Sharon this was my last slide, but I have one other to share with you. Sometimes, and this was not an FBI case, but sometimes I want to emphasize for everyone the importance of documentation. There had been pages of manuscripts that have been taken from a library in Italy. And these were ancient manuscripts. They were taken, and all of a sudden, someone who was doing research noticed some pages that were up on the University of Pennsylvania Library's website as manuscripts that had been donated to the library. The good news was the documents or pages that had been stolen from the Italian library have been documented in a book. And what we were able to do is go to Penn Library, who was amazingly cooperative with us, and show them clearly these are the same documents. If you look at the parts of the paper that are missing, if you look at the writing on that, they agreed there was no question, but what they had were the documents that had been stolen from the library. And again, we're being very good corporate citizens, made the immediate decision that no, these manuscripts needed to go back to where they belonged. So I guess in closing, what I'd like to say is that we often deal with citizens who want to do the right thing, and we count on that, and we are very grateful for that when it happens. In looking at crimes, if we can prosecute, we will. If we can't, we try to get the items back. And I have the great pleasure of working with Randy, with Chris, and Jake, and the rest of the art crime team on these kinds of cases, and hope we'll continue to get to do this for quite some time in the future. Thank you.
So I want to thank, I'm Sharon Flesher, back again for those of you who missed the beginning, and I want to invite all the speakers from the program to make themselves visible, come back on so that we can answer a few questions. I want to thank all the speakers. I myself really found these talks interesting, and I knew about some of these cases, but some were new to me, so thank you. And you all kept on time, actually, which is truly amazing. So that's a record. So we do have some time for questions, and we'll be able to cover many, if not most of them, we've been combining some of the questions a little bit. So let's start. I'm going to shoot with some of these questions, and a couple may be directed at a specific person, but the rest really are anyone can jump in, of course. So I'll start with one that's a general question, which is, how does the FBI work and coordinate with U.S. Customs on cultural property crimes? Does anyone want to tackle that one? No one? Please.
Yeah, I'll volunteer.
Okay.
All right. So my job here at headquarters is to do deconfliction with U.S. Customs and Homeland Security investigations. So if we receive a notification from another country, let's say that they've located an item of their patrimony that's looted, stolen, and ends up in the United States, if that referral goes to like the Department of State, then I will get notification, and my colleagues at Homeland Security investigations will get a notification, and then we'll talk to make sure that number one, the issue gets addressed, the matter gets addressed, but also that we're not wasting the public's money and our agency's time and resources by both investigating the same matter. So we do deconflict all the time with Customs and HSI and other federal agencies. We train with these folks. We go to lunch with these folks and dinner with these folks. We're constantly bouncing off ideas and investigative techniques. And we have great working relationships with these other agencies, and we're always looking to expand those relationships and making them better.
Randy, and if I can just add, in my experience as an AUSA, I've been fortunate enough to have cases where both the FBI Art Crime Team as well as Homeland Security investigations have been involved. They are both great partners. It's been a real pleasure to be able to do that. It's not always the case with some agencies in the federal government who remain nameless. But in these, particularly, I think we all have a passion for cultural property cases. And we know how important it is where the different agencies can bring their expertise and their capabilities to bear. So when we've been able to do joint investigations, it's worked out really well.
Mm-hmm. We have several questions dealing with the stolen art file and theft. So I'll bring a couple of them in now, and maybe we'll get to a couple of others later. Someone wants to know how you can list an item on the FBI's National Stolen Art File, and how can we list items missing in transit, for example, FedEx, UPS, with this file. I don't know that there's a difference in that if they're missing and stolen, they're missing and stolen no matter which way they are, but maybe one of you can tackle that question.
Yeah, I can handle that. Whenever we enter an item into the National Stolen Art File, one of the requirements is that we have a police report. So if someone in Des Moines, Iowa, there's a burglary of a residence, a painting is stolen, usually the local police will respond. That local department can then contact the FBI, provide their copy of their police report, any images, any information that they have about the theft. Now, the public doesn't have access to that information other than the photograph, a reference number, some dimensions, any unique markings on that particular piece. And so we would always require a police report. And normally we would get these referrals from other law enforcement agencies, whether it be state, local, or other federal agencies.
Thank you. Anyone want to add? Okay. Here's a question that was in some way touched on, but not fully. Where does the FBI stand with regard to the repatriation of Native American artifacts? Anyone? We saw a case dealing with a Native American property, but it wasn't so much artifacts. And of course, NAGPRA comes into play also when we're dealing with Native American. But I don't know what the word, where does the FBI stand? actually means, but do you get involved very often in Native American cases? In fact, I know you do, so maybe someone wants to address
Yes,
that.
we do. We do get involved. We do get involved with a lot of those cases. They're very complicated cases at times, but we have to have a violation of law. Now, there's other remedies that tribes may have to get back their cultural property. We don't give legal advice, but there are other remedies that are out there. But certainly if we had information that a piece of Native American cultural property was stolen, there's a violation of law, we would always pursue that. And then we could make recommendations if at the end of the day there was no crime that was committed. We could still make recommendations on how that piece could be recovered, but we certainly wouldn't give out legal advice. The way the FBI stands on this issue is that we will always look into an allegation, but at the end of the day, we have to have a violation of law.
Okay, so now I'm going back to another theft question, which is, could you speak to the success rate of the recovery of stolen items and how closely you work with insurance companies in those instances? Are certain classes of collectibles more successfully recovered than others? That is artwork versus violins or something else. I don't know what statistics you keep on that. And of course, there are also other databases as well, the Art Loss Register and others. So does anyone want to address this one? No?
I can field this one.
Chris, okay.
Yeah, so we don't really, I wouldn't say it's fair to give a percentage of how many items we recover per case. There was a former director who once said, our job is to find the truth. And that's really our job. Our job is to find the truth, whatever that truth may be. We are presented with cases often that are not actually thefts, whether it be a civil matter or misunderstanding. And we'll still take those cases through to the end to make sure that they're resolved. But if we're presented with enough evidence, and it comes down to what evidence is presented and what do we uncover in an investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a photograph of the item? Do we know where it is? Do we know we have a suspect? So there's so many different factors that go into it. And I hope that gives a little bit of color. I know I didn't directly answer the question, but as far as success rate per case of what we actually recover, we don't really keep statistics on that.
And Chris, yeah, that was excellent summary there. And I want to just add to the complexity of the issue by saying our violation is difficult when you think of it from this perspective. We encounter objects that span recorded human history, can be found anywhere around the world, and can be trafficked by anyone in the world. So the way that we triage our matters and we look at things is exactly like Chris said. We just try and get to the truth of it. And so what you would declare as finding something, we may not be able to find it, but we get to the result. Okay, we're not going to be able to find it, but we understand the story behind it. Or we looked into it. It's not what was, initially alleged. In the end, we're too small of a team to have big data along those lines that would make sense or be fair to that type of question. Because again, it's a massive question and it's a great question, but it's just very difficult. And hopefully with our responses, you understand why.
I can give it, if I was a different perspective, I think part of the question also dealt with how do we deal with insurance companies? And certainly we often deal with insurance companies, whether it's just getting records from them via subpoena, whether it's working with them in another way. But one issue that sometimes has come up, for example, when an item has been stolen, and this was the case with the Christian Erder rifle as one example, and if claim had been made to the insurance company, the question then becomes, well, who owns the item now? I mean, is the insurance company at that point really potentially would be looked at as the owner? So in the case of the Christian Erder rifle, the insurance company had gone bankrupt. So now we're trying to deal with the state of Pennsylvania and figuring out who actually do we deal with respect to this. But often in these kinds of cases, when you're talking about an object of cultural heritage, a piece of artwork that has been stolen, we've had situations where the insurance company has made the decision that we will work it out with the individual from whom it had been stolen to reach an equitable resolution for everyone. So it gets trickier sometimes, because when you have had the object passing, really the possession or the ownership passing through. But we've been, I think, at least in the cases that Jake and I have worked, have been very successful in terms of reaching what we think is a good resolution for everybody.
If an item is recovered, that there's a clause in there that there's likely an opportunity for the original owner to be able to return the money, buy back the item, and become the rightful owner again. But just to answer the original question, yes, we work with insurance companies all the time.
So we have a lot of insurance people who are attending this program. So I'm sure if something wasn't said correctly, one of them is going to chime in. I'm going to skip to a different area and do a broad topic right now, which is, in an ideal world, if you could put together a wish list, what additional tools and resources do you need to ramp up art and cultural crime prosecutions so that the wrongdoers can be held accountable and criminals might be deterred when they know there is the real possibility of indictment and conviction? Now, that's an entire course, but maybe one or two of you might have some thoughts on that one. And it was asked, I must say, it's asked by someone who is a very experienced person in this area.
One of the things I had alluded to earlier that is critical for us, particularly in looking at antiquities, trafficking, or looted objects, but really in any type of art crime, is documentation. If you own artwork, if you care for artwork, if it's in your custody, document what you have. One of the big issues that we often have is, particularly when items have been stolen from a museum and it's been a long time, or especially a smaller museum, they simply do not have the documentation of the provenance. We don't have good photographs. So it's very difficult for us. Even if we recover an object, can we then say this is who it belongs to? That also helps us if we have the documentation and we can then prove that it's stolen. If we can prove that it's stolen, then our next step, of course, is to prove that the individual who had it or who sold it also knew that it was stolen. But the key, I can't say enough, is being able to have that hard evidence, which starts with documenting what the object is and how it came into the possession of whoever it might have been stolen from later.
I'm going to break a rule that I have, which is that I never address questions that don't have a question mark at the end. But this one is very brief, and I thought you'd be pleased to hear it from someone who admits it's not a question, but a comment. The work the FBI is doing makes me very proud of my government. I figured that would please you, so I'm going to say it. Anyway, now going on.
Sharon, just to answer,
Yeah.
That's a wonderful comment. Thank you to whoever made that. And thank you, Sharon, for sharing that. KT's right. I think we would all, if we had to vote, we would love to have perfect provenance. And I know Lynn Nicholas Raper Europa, who was on one of your previous IFAR.
And Lynn is attending this program right now.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yes.
I mean, her work, I mean, it was seminal, and it's a must read. And, that type of information obviously helps guide our investigations, bring the evidence forth so that KT and the great AUSAs and other prosecutors around the country can do their job. But also to answer the question, in the field, where we're looking from the Cultural Heritage Coordinating Committee is exactly proper identification of the objects in the field. So at a level of initial meeting with the object and the agent, to properly identify, right now we have the cultural property expert on call program up and running, which again is a product here of the Cultural Heritage Coordinating Committee. Very proud to have that working with Penn. But the future beyond that we're already looking at is trying to take the phones that are all in our pockets and have some sort of mobile application that can take a photograph of an image, have an algorithm potentially compare it against publicly available objects to say, well, it's likely this. And then from there, we can go ahead and make better, gather better information. And again, this is all with due respect to privacy rights. This is publicly available information. These are just some of the things that if you're asking the question, especially at our ports of entry, agents in the field or police officers, when they encounter it, wouldn't it be great to know what it is, or at least have the ability in real time to try and figure that out? That doesn't alleviate any responsibility to go ahead and conduct a thorough investigation and bring forth the evidence, but that's just something a little bit more granular that if we could snap our fingers today, I think a lot of us would make great use of.
And for the museum folks that are attending tonight, we talked about photographs and provenance and documentation behind pieces, but for the museum folks, inventories, inventories, inventories. It's very frustrating when you ask the question, well, when's the last time that this piece that was stolen at some unknown point in time was documented in an inventory? And if it's been 50 plus years, that can create quite a problem and a challenge for the investigators. So.
Understood. I think point well taken. We have actually several questions dealing with similar issues. One, how does an expert get on your expert list or get on your expert radar? And then, not quite related, but several questions. How can someone get to work at the FBI? So maybe you can tackle those quickly, but since we had several of each of them, I want to at least ask them in general.
Randy, I'll take the first one if that's all right, or to the team here. So as it relates to the cultural property expert on-call program, we are working, we are rolling this out. We started this conceptually in 2017. We worked with some of our great institutions in 2018 to better formulate exactly this question. And it's not until we were able to get this agreement signed through the State Department as the Secretariat of the CHCC, where, and that was last August, 2020, we're starting to see this come to fruition. The idea is that will be on behalf of our great institutions, spearheaded by Penn, but we look right now at the Smithsonian that we work with so closely and all these other great institutions. So many of them provide great experience right off the bat. Now, should we need to go further? The goal is that this program will hopefully have a way to do that. And there is a rollout that we're trying to do that will take several years in coordination with the Cultural Heritage Coordinating Committee. It's not specific to the FBI, it's specific to it's general to the U.S. government, where we can have greater awareness and connectivity with those experts in the field and identify what specific areas. The biggest problem, and I want to say this because it's very important, is we didn't want to have expert burnout in terms of this is rolled out. Every expert we know wants to raise their hand and help out, but this requires a lot of effort. It may ultimately require you to testify, and that's not for everybody. In the same regard, you may not get a call for 5 years. So we didn't want to have this giant sign-up list. It's not something that the government maintains. The government does not maintain this list. We need to be clear about that. That is housed through our cultural heritage partners and the agreement with the CHCC. So it's something that we hope to make use of and roll out in the future through the conferences such as ASOR, AIA, ASA, and a lot of other institutions where we know we have vetted experts. So it's slow, it's steady. Bear with us. Thank you for your support.
Okay, please, if I can interject, if you can keep us informed as well about that, I'd appreciate that. And so now the other part of the question.
I can handle that.
Okay.
So the good news is through FBIjobs.gov, the FBI is actively recruiting for all different types of positions, whether it be for the special agent position, the analyst position, everything down to honors internships. There's a big push for new hires now. So it's all the application process details are on that website. Unfortunately, we do get a lot of questions about, I would like to work for the FBI's art crime team. How do I do that? And it's a very small unit. It's a very specialized unit. I think there are about 14,000 special agents in the Bureau right now, and 20 of us work art crime matters, and even less than that are full-time art investigators. So I, for example, worked for the FBI for 11 years before I worked art crime matters. So it's very specialized. I would say if you are interested in becoming an agent or working for the FBI, you should probably be prepared to work any different type of case or violation that the FBI wants to assign you to, and in any location throughout the country. You can be sent pretty much anywhere. And then if you do have that art background, Randy is the guy to speak to and keep in touch with. But again, it is a small, very specialized unit, and the opportunities are pretty small.
And Sharon, just one
Yes, sure.
alibi on the experts. Any agency is still free to go direct with any of their trusted and vetted experts that they've dealt with in the past. I want to make sure that that's clear. This is merely an opportunity to have a single point of entry that's easy into the field, should you not know what object you're dealing with. But we already have pre-established relationships with so many experts, not just us, but so does HSI, CBP, a lot of the federal U.S. attorney's offices. So we want to make sure that that's understood as well. This is just one extra way to quickly find an expert to help you with your object identification in the field.
Okay, thank you. I'm noticing the time. In theory, we should be ending right now, but we have quite a few more questions. So since you graciously agreed to go a little bit longer with some questions, we'll take a few more, and then at a certain moment, I will just say stop. So I don't want to overextend our welcome. But I have two questions that are similar but different. So I'm going to take them both right now. One is, if one is aware of examples of forged art, but one is not the owner of that art, can it be reported to the FBI for investigation? And then the other part, the related one, because it's similar, is I'm a fine art appraiser in a firm. If we suspect that a single seller is the source of a significant number of forgeries, how should we proceed? In each case, we're not speaking of the owner, someone who has ownership interest, and there's always a risk at a certain point, and I don't know what confidential information would have already been shared that they would find this information out. How would you tackle this? I think these are really important questions. Anyone?
KT, I look forward to everyone jumping in on this, but I'd like to lead because I care very much about this issue as it deals with appraisers or art experts who engage with the material on a regular basis. I'm an attorney, so is KT, and we have ethical obligations as members of the bar. If you see something, it doesn't mean that you need to break confidentiality, but I would encourage any appraiser who is part of any of the appraisal associations out there to look at your ethics or obligations. And it doesn't mean that you must report fraud that you see, but should you have a question of, is this something I can break confidentiality? I would encourage you to contact somebody in that association to have that further discussion, because as Chris alluded to, if you see fraud and you know it's clear, it seems like there's at least an ethical obligation that you could report that and break confidentiality in that manner. We also understand the difficulty because that particular person is paying you, and that becomes problematic. We are not immune to the issues that you're going through. We're simply saying from an ethical standpoint, it's worth a deeper reflection when you know that you are encountering fraud. We encourage you to really examine that issue and, if possible, come forward.
Anyone else want to step in that question? An additional thing is, and this question comes up a lot, we certainly have had it in our authentication research service, if your initial agreement actually states that in our case, we have the right to publish the results of the research, it gives us some freedom to share information, not willy-nilly. One has to be very careful nonetheless. And this question has come up, I know, with some of the appraisal organizations and whatever, and also conservators who see things. So anyway, thank you. So let me ask this question, going back to theft. How quickly and easily can the items in the stolen art file be shared with other countries? I'm not sure I understand this question because some of the items are publicized on the website, but not all of them. But in any case, and vice versa. And it's not exactly the same question, but the same questioner. And do you use object ID?
So, as I said previously about the National Stolen Art File, the law enforcement sensitive information is not shared with the public for very obvious reasons.
Yes.
There's a limited amount of information that is available to the public. Any foreign government, if they have access to the internet, can go to the FBI.gov website and get to the National Stolen Art File and search for a stolen object or any gallery or any auction house, just like the other private databases. The public has access, but the public does not have access to the law enforcement sensitive information that's held within FBI holdings. We just simply cannot give that out to the public. If someone from the public though calls, we can ask follow-up questions and make that determination whether or not the item that they're calling about is in fact the one that is listed in the National Stolen Art File. But we don't give out police reports to the general public. So please, no one call asking for police reports or law enforcement sensitive information. But certainly we would welcome tips from the public if they think they've encountered a stolen piece and they see somewhat of a likeness to one object in the National Stolen Art File. And as far as the ID recognition, that's new technology that's out there. We're working on it. We're working on a new version of the National Stolen Art File. So more to come, but I would invite the public to use the existing resource that's out there. It's a great resource for everyone that's involved in the art market. Please use it and try to help us recover some stolen pieces, please.
Yes, please.
Please.
And the back of every issue of our IFAR journal has a stolen art alert. And we've had that since 1977. And in the public, it was first standalone and now in our publications. So with almost no exceptions, there's only one issue of the journal that hasn't had that in it because it was a special issue. This is another more general question. What is the chief what is the chief purpose of your team? To safeguard relations between the U.S. and foreign sovereigns, to protect people from trickery, to protect the art market, all of the above, and or other things not mentioned in that long list. What do you really think of as the purpose? Obviously, there's an aspect to protecting the integrity of the art field and the art market, but is there anything that you would think of in terms of the chief that takes primacy?
I mean, the purpose of the art crime team itself is what I had went over earlier in my presentation, is to be able to deploy a specialized team of agents with the right skills and training to respond to different matters and incidents and crimes involving cultural property, to work investigations involving those particular cases, to seek prosecution and restitution and repatriation when we can. And as KT said earlier, sometimes, we cannot have someone prosecuted for whatever reason. But we would still want to secure that object that we recover and make sure that we can repatriate that item, make victims whole. We like to work long-term, complex, transnational, multi-defendant cases, and that, a lot of local, state, and, law enforcement agencies, just for lack of resources, cannot work. So that's where the art crime team steps up and deploys those agents for those different matters and those different investigations.
Okay. I'm only going to ask a couple of more questions. One is a short one, and the other, depending on how you want to answer it, is short or long. Okay, so the short one for Randy. Was the fake Matisse, which to me was pretty obvious fake, you discussed, offered through a prominent auction house?
Prominent auction house? No.
Okay.
It's small auction house. Yes. And a lot of times that's where, you know, a $100 million piece is going to come underneath a lot of more scrutiny than a $50,000 piece.
Yes.
So, you know, obviously the small I call them mom and pop galleries and auction houses, you know, you can see a lot more forgeries possibly going through those particular markets as opposed to the bigger auction houses and the bigger galleries. So it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but.
So now the question that when we were speaking before this program, I promised you was going to come up. So any update on the Isabel Stewart Gardner case that you're able to share? I know our audience is.
So here is the update.
Something, please. I want to learn something new.
Here is the update.
Okay.
The case is still active, and we are still looking, and we are not giving up. And Katie and I are working closely with our Boston counterparts. Jeff Kelly, who's the case agent, phenomenal agent, been working this since 2002, and Kristen Koch up there. We meet regularly. We discuss. We you know, and work to support Boston in this matter. We can tell you that the FBI is still looking and will continue to look, and it's a very important case. So it is not a cold case, it is an active case, and it will be until we find these.
I want to throw in the fact that on the 10th anniversary of that theft, which was a 1990 theft, IFAR hosted a program on the 10th anniversary of the theft. We hosted another program on the 20th anniversary of the theft, and the case agents from Boston, because they were by then different. Jeff Kelly came down at the 20th anniversary, but Neil Cronin had been before, and he tragically was in an accident and was killed not long after that. And also the supervisory agent came down from Boston. I wanted to do another one. I never thought I'd be around. I wanted to do another one on the 25th, but there wasn't that much new to add to the programs, and the other two, particularly the 20th, was really very substantive with the U.S. attorney and the case agent and Anthony Amore from the Gardner Museum, the security chief of the Gardner Museum. So I want to be the person hosting a program when those works are found. I want that glory. And let's hope that they're found really and in good condition. I mean, that's, as an art person, at this point, I think it's less of interest to prosecute anyway. You're not going to be able really, or at least let's say it's unlikely you would prosecute if anyone is even still alive who was involved. We care about the artworks being found and in good condition. So before we end, since the the four of you, I'm seeing myself, since the four of you are still here, is there anything you'd like to add to this discussion before I thank you all and close out? This is an opportunity. Yes.
Just make a comment with respect to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist. I mean, you heard me talk earlier about the theft that occurred over 40 years ago from the Valley Forge Museum. Mm-hmm. And 40 years later, not only did we get the object back, but we actually did prosecute someone. So it's not to be said that someone could not be prosecuted in connection with the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum thefts, because if someone was found with any of the objects taken, if we can show we think it's hard to believe they wouldn't know that it was stolen at this point. Yes. But if they possessed it, if they stored it, if they tried to sell it, if they tried to give it away, all of that under the statute is a prosecutable offense today, because that's the way the statute is written. So yes, again, number one, do we all want to get hopefully all of them back. Yes, but also it is not a foregone conclusion that given the right evidence, we would not also be able to prosecute someone involved in the theft or in the concealment of those objects since that time.
Well, I think that's a great way to end this really fascinating program. I want to thank everyone in the audience for staying with us. And I want to thank especially our wonderful speakers. Now, just for some logistics here, we have been recording this program, and if there is no technical glitch, it is our hope to at some point, it'll take a little while, it always does, because we like to edit out for quality and whatever, and then eventually post it on our website, where we have many other programs posted, including our recent program, a very ambitious one. In fact, Lynn Nicholas spoke at it on provenance research, and there were 6 speakers on that. We don't post every program, but we try, and so stay tuned. And again, I want to thank our speakers. Bravo. Really, you did a great job, and thank you in the audience. So I'm going to say goodbye on behalf of IFAR. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, thanks to all of you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you all.